Okay, information that's maintained in the Indian Land Registry, we went over this. They have absolutely everything that is permitted under the Indian Act that has been submitted for registration. Now, on the Indian Land Registry, that you search by a lot number or a parcel, but you can also search generally. And on your general, we'll have all your OICs, the creation of the reserve should be on there. If there are blanket permits for utilities, it should be on there. So it's very specific to things that affect the reserve as a whole rather than just specific lots. So you will have your reserve identification. My reserve's 55000. What's your reserve here? 026? So it'd be 02600. Yeah. Okay, and then your parcel identification, because reserves are chopped up in blocks usually. However, that will differ east to west because surveying practices changed over time. Now the west, it's because it's younger, is on a grid, and they call it the Western Dominion surveys. And it's actually pretty easy because it is typically on a grid. That was their standard then. Again, it was founded almost 150 years after out here. So there are differences across the country. And then you get to Quebec is done totally different. BC is done totally different. You have item numbers. Everything on the registry is numbered. And it helps you just in your sequential searches. The type of instrument is also readily available. It identifies it clearly. The dates that instruments are shown, the chronology of the transactions, and they go by the actual instrument date. So if it says right in the front of the document, usually pretty well close to the top, it'll give the day, the month, the year. Some documents, more newer documents, actually do it on the signature line. So it's just a matter of looking at the documents, because if you're entering these yourselves, you need to have a procedure of what date are you looking at when you're registering, because a registration date is different than the instrument date. The instrument date is the date the instrument was signed, and the registration date is the date it's actually registered and assigned a registration number or an instrument number. Now, even if you stay under the Indian Act and you get delegated authority, you actually get a stamp you stamp all the documents, just like the registry that says this was registered in the Indian Land Registry on such and such day, month, year, and whoever has the authority would sign it to say that it was registered. You would also, for your own purposes, come up with your own stamp if you're going to hold your in-house registry. You would also have to develop a sequential numbering system. I even have a numbering system for my lands department for bank council resolutions, so I can easily identify them, and I have a register of BCRs coming out of my department from day one. It's just another tracking system. Your council may have their own overall numbering system, and somehow you would have to identify yours, or I would recommend you to identify yours using their system. It could be a matter of just adding lands or ECDEV or some initial something on the BCR to identify the department that it's coming out of. The grantor identifies who is granting the interest. So if it's the band, then the grantor would be the band is granting an interest to Jennifer to build a house, or to Donna to have a lease. If it's the Crown, then it'll say Her Majesty. So in both cases, grantor. If it involves a band member, the band member number is on the document. Now they're blanked out on the registry. This was a huge contentious issue with the land registry because band numbers are private. And for decades, when you got an instrument, because it could have originally been a CP, you see, so think of it. You'd have an allotment, or you'd have the plan registered, the allotment, the CP when it was issued, to whom, and their band number. CP is now, or there's a head lease put on there now because the locality is leasing it, and now you've got lease documents and mortgage documents. Their lawyers can access the same information. So this land search, land title search, is going back and forth, and your band number is on there. And it took a long time, but they say now it blanks it out unless you have a specific user access, which would be like the land register at the band, your membership clerks, things like that. However, even a land officer or an ECDEV officer can't just run a membership list. That's specific to membership. They used to be way more liberal about it, but they sure aren't anymore. You'd have your legal land descriptions. And I always say, as far as economic development and lands, please, if you have any money around, get your land surveyed. It just helps in the long run, because sometimes something will come up and you don't have it surveyed. Even if it's large parcels, but for instance, say you have vacant parcels of land over here that you know are part of the commercial section, is just even if you survey it out in one big parcel, so you can identify it for commercial, because you can always subdivide it after. It's just you get a head start. It's just part of the planning. And also then everything will be identified by legal description on your registry, whether it's in-house or Indian Land Registry. Acreage, it describes the size of lots. Usually it's in square meters if it's a lot, acreage if it's acreage, or hectares. And believe you me, nothing is all metric. Comments, all your narrative comments, terms of agreements, expiration, and any other pertinent facts. This is where I was saying you have a remarks box, and you can put different things in there, which are very useful. Presently, this information is available to the user in 2 forms. Now, this is actually changing with the new system. There's more available. Okay, there's a lot that's available. Like I said, they've now merged with Narcan, and part of the program used to be Fortress, they called it. And all it is, you'd bring it up by parcel number. Beside it would have this little insignia diagram. If you click that, the document would come up that matches that. But now it's even way more layered, and you can get, as I was saying the other day, your plans, how the plans change, what else is on there, and it's layers and layers. And I think that's why they found the common people like us that use the old system were getting confused, because you can have like 15 windows open of information, and it's learning how the system works. So you don't open 15. When you're trying to get to the 15th one, you can directly get there. Typical uses is especially all your encumbrance checks and land status reports. You've got to run abstract report to find out what's going on, what has been going on, what's there currently, and of course research. Because if you're thinking of changing some of your planning here, or you wanted housing in one area and now you have a vacant area adjacent to commercial, what was there before? Do we know what was there? Historical information can be added in, like I said earlier, but also we have to look to see, is there some kind of easement that's gone through, 50 years ago, which would hinder some of the development. Some of your other tools, of course, historical events on a given portion of a reserve can be recorded. In addition, there's a need to have good systems that focus on the current transactions and the commitments that they contain. For instance, tax evidence of sorry, not tax, evidence of insurance. It's another thing. Businesses should have to provide evidence of insurance every year. The reason why, what if their place floods or burns? Floods is a good one. It's more recent because they're finding this. And it affects neighboring property, and that neighboring property is banned property. How is the ban protected if the person doesn't have insurance? Now to fix it is taking away from every single band member because it's their money. So it's just practices like that. That's one. Another, of course, is if the rents or if licenses are due, or any other kind of specific term in the lease that requires a review annually. And you just bring it up in your BFs, which is just bring forward. It can be as simple as in your Outlook programs or anything. It doesn't have to be something fancy. However, they do have another program called Netlands. The Indian Land Registry, like your in-house registry would, maintain the history of events on any given portion of land. In addition, there's a need to have these good systems so you know what you can and cannot do within your nation. It's necessary to keep track of all the transactions. For example, if you're responsible for 500 agreements, then you have to have current information about all 500 agreements. And Lord help you if they're all different. That's why you need some mechanisms to have information brought forward to you when rents are due, insurance certificates are due, business licensing is due, etc. If it's necessary to keep track of all these, it is necessary to keep track of all these. However, in saying this, like 500 agreements, in a case like that, you've probably got one big area developed, say for housing. You might have 2 housing developments in there. 250 of them are probably all under the same agreement, and the other 250 are under a different agreement. So it's one agreement for many. However, you still have all of them to look after, but it's not like managing 500 agreements that are all totally different. Now there's 3 basic types of land records. There's your operating records, which are the individual land holding files, lot files and that. And then there's a quick reference, an automated system. Both will be automated, but automated meaning in like a short reference type system. And you display the most pertinent and frequent information required, like expiry dates, rent reviews, payment dates, specific conditions. I know it sounds old school, but we back up everything, back it up. And what I used to do, this is how I could manage it. Things that were done, I had this quick system. Originally was a card system. And I have to laugh because it's still there. They still have this little old, it's real estate cards like the old way that land was done in a real estate office. And of course, Netlands. Here's an old quick reference system. This is, when I first started, this is what we dealt with on a day-to-day basis, and then pull out the old roll thing, you know? That's what it was. And at this time, before the paper came, we used to get microfiche. So we always had microfiche readers. But this is just a simple one to give you an idea. And this you could actually automate, you know? You could just quickly put in under access. Any database would help you. And if you don't do a lot of transactions, then it's very minimal, but it's still worthy to have, or it's still important to have. Netlands. You love it or hate it, but if you're really active in doing things, it's a great program to track it for you from day one, from when you think of it, right through to complete documents. It's a project management. It works as a project manager as well. You can get free training on it. They give you the program. Netlands is just a computer application to manage your transactions and activities. It assists the user to schedule activities, track your revenues documents, correspondence, any significant dates. For instance, if under contracts for development, okay, you enter into an agreement with a proponent who's a big-time developer, there are conditions to the contract during the construction stage that have to be met. You put it all in here, so it'll flag you all the time what's required. Prepare all your status reports relevant to all aspects of land management. You can collect all kinds of data so that you can do quarterly reports, monthly reports of every single bit of activity that's taking place. Quickly, there's an INAC user and a First Nation user. As we said, in INAC, they use this program. And then you can get use for it. Now, what I said, BC, they'll only give us the shell of the program. And it was told right flat to us, we're not giving you the information because we'll get sued. They know of so many discrepancies already. That's why if you look at all the main court cases, they come out of BC. Okay, so forms and documents associated with collective and individual interests can be obtained from INAC, your regional office, or any service centers that they may have, formerly district offices. First Nation that have opted into FNLM or comprehensive self-government will have forms and documents developed for their First Nation specific. And in most cases, the documents are identical because why recreate the wheel? But you won't have the protection of the Crown. The wording will be different to be specific for liability on the First Nation. But at the same time, we'll identify areas where the First Nation is protected rather than the Crown being protected. So essentially, the Crown's coming out, the First Nation's going in. Okay, that concludes the written material on this workshop. And thank you, because I know these workshops are quite intense on data. I don't expect you to learn it, like know it, but at least have a gist of how it goes. We'll go back over some stuff to make sure we understand what